everyone, I'm Meredith, and listen, I'm just a girl stuck in my apartment looking for someone, well, anyone to talk to. So I found some people. My guest is Mo Lightning. Mo's a morning radio show host for WQLZ in Illinois, and he's also a mental health awareness advocate, which is something that so many of us have been struggling and dealing with because of the pandemic over the last 6 months. Now, before Mo and I get started, just don't forget to like and subscribe to the Let's Talk About a YouTube channel so you always get notifications of when there's a new episode. Go ahead, Mo and I will wait. Okay, did you do it? Mo, welcome. Let's talk about it.
Okay, thank you for having me. Let me ask you how you're doing.
Oh, I'm doing okay. I mean, it's a little rainy and yucky here in New York, but you know, all things considered, how are you?
I'm doing well. Now, how are you holding up during the pandemic and everything?
Well, I would say, again, all things considered, pretty okay.
Mm-hmm.
My now husband and I had to postpone our wedding. So there was that we had to contend with and overcome. That had its rough periods. We have gotten married since. So, you know, what could I say? I mean, newlywed bliss, right?
Right. And you find out quite quickly when you're quarantined with somebody if you really like them or not.
Exactly. What about you? Pandemic life, what's it been like for you?
There's good days and there's bad days. There are struggles. You know, there are the highs, there are the lows. I'm a radio broadcaster by day, so that's typically what I do. And no industry has been safe from 2020, and I've lost a lot of great coworkers, and it's made for a lot of long days. There was a stretch that I pretty much worked every single day for 3 straight months just because we need to keep things operating. We need to keep things going. And I'm on actually 2 stations, and I host my own podcast, and it adds up. I've hosted hundreds of shows, which sounds ideal until you realize everybody's still going to be upset. You can give them that escapism, but you can't take it personally if people aren't instantaneously happy afterwards. You know what I'm saying?
And I'm sure it's something for you to contend with too. Unlike people who have lost their jobs, you have 6, it seems, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
So you're always busy, which is important during the pandemic.
Yes.
There is nothing else to do. But when you're going 27 hours, 10 days a week, that's going to strain on you too, on the mental health.
So that's something I had to learn early on is with my position, I'm able to help people smile on a day-to-day basis. But the way 2020's been, no matter what I do, I'm not going to be able to get 100% smiles 100% of the time. Otherwise, if I started thinking about that, if I dwelled on that myself, I'm going to bring myself down. And the depression and the anxiety is going to gang up on me. So I had to learn pretty quickly not to take it personally if 2020 has upset others.
Yeah. And I mean, you don't need reports to know this, that more and more people, because of the pandemic or pandemic related issues, are struggling with mental health issues, whether it's, I mean, and yet those reports are out there, whether it's the election, the economy, civil unrest, isolation. People are more and more having mental health issues, and you being on the media side of things, there's one way for you to deal with mental health and be aware of it. But how do you personally deal with mental health? What has your experience been? You've been very open about talking about your own journey with mental health.
I do like to preface most of these conversations by saying that I am not a mental health professional. I am not in that field. So if you are having suicidal thoughts, for instance, reach out to someone. But I have noticed over my time, because I have struggled and still struggle. Today is actually a little bit of a down day for me on the depression side of things. But I've noticed that a lot of people are just looking for that outlet. They're just looking for someone to understand. And for those of you who are on the fence about opening up, you're not quite sure if you're comfortable discussing this with others, realize the expression "it's okay to not be okay" is a good expression. It's all right to feel down, and that's where I started feeling like I could help others in my journey, when I realized I wasn't the only one feeling guilty. Like, I felt bad if I was down or depressed. I felt guilty, which then further hit me down that spiral. And then I realized other people felt the same way, that they weren't aware that others felt guilty about the way they feel. And we shouldn't feel guilty about that. And I think once I was able to start connecting with others there, then that really helped me tell my story. But I've never attempted suicide. There was one day, January 3rd, 2017, I was going to. And I was very lucky. I was across the state. I was without work, which is something that many people can relate to here in 2020. I didn't have friends or family nearby. The money was running out because I didn't have a job. And I think I got 5 rejection emails that day. Like, it was just a day that things kept piling up. My girlfriend and I were not in a good spot. So I don't know what happened, but I didn't sound like me that day from what I understand from others. I don't remember much about that day, except it was days before my birthday. And so I was enjoying a birthday coupon, like a free burger from Red Robin. I think I was enjoying. Like, I remember those details about everything about the meal because I expected that to be my last meal. And then all of a sudden I started getting calls and text messages from people that I wasn't talking to. I wasn't writing them saying, "Hey, I'm in a bad spot." I was content with what I was going to do. I was eating my last meal, figuring, how am I going to go home and do this? Literally, I was going to drive home and leave. And like, the world saved me that day, that something was put out in the universe, that my parents called me and my best friend called out of the blue, and they don't call out of the blue. And they were able to talk me down from whatever proverbial ledge I was on, to give it another go the next day. And then they checked in the next day, and I gave it another shot on January 5th. And I just kept going until eventually life did turn around, and it wasn't instant. But I was lucky to have some good people in my life that were just checking on me. They had a hunch. And that to me was huge. Just somebody showing that effort, somebody willing to take the time and say, "Hey, you're not sounding like yourself. What's going on? Talk to me." And even if you don't relate, and I know a lot of people feel they can't help anybody who suffers from depression or anybody who is suicidal, you can help. Just offer a shoulder, offer an ear, and just be willing to be there for people goes a long way, a lot farther than you probably realize.
But now during the pandemic, we can't be there physically for people, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So how has that and social distancing affected your mental health, and from what other people in similar having similar issues are telling you, that to be so socially distant, what does that do with mental health issues?
Obviously, we by nature as humans want that physical contact. We want that touch. We want to be able to hug our loved ones. We want to be able to shake hands. So not having that has affected so many people. As you said earlier, that the suicides are up right now. But I think if you're in a bad headspace, it's easy for us to say, reach out to us. Let us know how you're doing. If you need to help, open up to us. But it's not always that easy for those who are struggling. I think the best thing with having some extra time, some of us do have that extra time now, many of us do, send more of those messages. Maybe send "I love you" messages to your friends. Even if you're not used to saying that, say that. I don't care if you're a dude and another, it doesn't matter. Make it uncomfortable by letting people know you care about them. And that's going to open up discussion, because I think if you're struggling mentally, and I've had my moments. I've certainly had my stretch. I've been lucky because I do enough training. I'm not in this field, but I'm learning about this field, and I'm taking classes and courses, so I can recognize when I'm getting into a bout. And I've come a long way. I wasn't always that way. And I know I wasn't always able to open up. So this year I've been okay because one, I've kept myself busy, but two, I know when I need help and I know who I can turn to. And that's not always easy to identify either. But I think if somebody is quieter than usual, you're normally texting with a buddy and you haven't heard from them in a day or two, just pop in and check in. I think that's the best way to do it over the social distance 2020.
Now, for people, though, that want to help, I would imagine it's really easy, though, to cross a line and, maybe do the wrong thing. Hey, snap out of it. We're going to get through this, smile. It'll be what would you
Yeah.
whether they either recognize others in their lives that could use some support, or they want to be able to help when the time comes. What advice would you say? Here's the things not to
do. Well, and everybody's different, of course, but to me, a big one has been realize, when somebody tells you others have it worse. And I think that's where a lot of the guilt comes in that we spoke about earlier in the interview, is the guilt. And when you are feeling down and then somebody says, hey, don't feel guilty, don't feel bad, somebody has it worse than you feel worse about that. And then you keep it in even more rather than letting it out. The way I look at it, you can't see when somebody's struggling mentally. Typically, physically, you can't see it. It doesn't mean they're not broken. And they may not be as broken as somebody else, but they are still broken. Like, I could break a bone in my wrist. You could break 2 bones in your wrist. You have the worst breakage, but this doesn't go away because of that. Mm-hmm. And I think when people realize that yeah, life can be worse. Maybe you have a roof over your head right now, and you have the ability to pay bills where others do not. It doesn't mean you can't be depressed. So if you're trying to help somebody realize that comparing and contrasting apples to oranges isn't probably going to help, really the best way to help is just say, hey, are you doing all right? How are you feeling? How's your headspace? And just listening. Because really, I think a lot of people, not everybody, but in most cases that I've encountered over the decades of my struggles with this, just finding somebody willing to take a few minutes to listen goes a long way. And you don't have to have all the answers. They may not even be looking for you to answer or solve their problem. They just want to know people care. And from there, then maybe they actually take the right steps to get proper medical help, or at least they get out of bed that day. They get off the couch that day and they're willing to go out and see some sunshine.
Now, even for those that aren't necessarily struggling with mental health, stress is something we can all relate to, and it is up for people now more than ever because of the pandemic, and perhaps a group particularly affected right now in the season is parents sending kids back to school. The stress of making the right decisions around that, fears around what they're about to embark on. Mm-hmm. Have you spoken with parents, whether it's through the radio stations or other communities and networks dealing with this, and it's translating into mental health scares?
There's a lot of scares, and I think what's the scariest part for everybody is that nobody has an answer. I don't think there is a definitive answer to any of the parental sending students back, virtual learning, hybrid learning questions, because all it takes is one person to be reckless or angry or not thinking properly that day. That could put many, many others in danger. Some people feel they don't have a choice. Some don't have a choice, that I have to work, but my kids need to learn. I can't be here. I don't have anybody to watch them. I don't envy any parent here in 2020 that has to struggle between being a parent and paying the bills and being able to put food on the table. And so I have seen the stress. You're absolutely right. I have seen the stress from so many individuals that are scared. Everybody wants to do the right thing. I think we could all agree that we really do all want the best for each other, but we don't have the same means of getting there. And this year, being so unpredictable has made it so difficult, and the stress is up. And I've seen people go to extreme lengths that they are willing to sell items that are cherished to them, something that family heirlooms, just because they need to put bread on the table. So I have seen a lot of people really kind of, I wouldn't say lose their mind, because that's a strong term there, but a lot of people that are starting to get to the end of the line that don't know what to do or where to turn. Mm-hmm. And that's a dangerous situation for anybody who is not aware of their own health.
Sure. On that path, I'm sure it's also been reported that drug and alcohol usage and then abuse is because of these stresses and struggles. Any advice or insight you can provide?
We're all struggling to find a direction here in 2020 and during the pandemic, and we don't know when it's going to end. That doesn't make things better either. But turning to these stimulants too often is not going to make things any better. And ultimately, the addicted know this, but don't know how to deal or cope otherwise. So I think finding your local program, and there are local programs, probably more than most people realize, are willing to work. I have one locally called the Gateway Foundation, which is amazing at getting people to realize it's okay. It's all right. We're not going to take you out of the world, but we're going to get you back on path. And they're not going to just clean you up physically and then throw you back into the environment that led to this. They're going to work with you to clean you up internally and externally. And I know my program locally is not the only one.
Now, I watched your extremely moving and personal talk you gave from a walk last year, the Out of the Darkness walk. And that was to raise awareness for suicide prevention. But I watched this talk and I was extremely moved by it. But I couldn't help but think one thing. More than likely, there isn't going to be that walk this year, right? Again, because of the pandemic and social distancing.
Not physically, anyway.
Not physically. That lack of community for people or outlets for people to come together, these events, how does that affect you? How do you think that affects mental health on a whole?
Honestly, I think it puts a lot of individuals behind. I think when you're able to congregate amongst a whole group of like-minded individuals, in this case, those who have suffered from suicide, have known somebody, lost somebody to suicide, to be able to grieve with others is very therapeutic. Complete strangers, but just knowing that you've been through that battle as well can link a bond. I've made some amazing friends over the years because of the Out of the Darkness walk specifically. So I think not having the physical event will harm some progress. I think there'll be some individuals that won't click on their mouse to watch the virtual event. I've been asked to speak again, and it's going to be like this. This is going to be over the camera, and it's not the same as being able to go in person, get off stage, talk to individuals directly, hug these individuals, and have that bond. But I think for the most part, people will still click. People will still reach and still want to be a part of that community. Even if it's not this, there's enough virtual events now. I think people are getting used to this new virtual way of life, but it's certainly not ideal. And I really hope anybody who is struggling isn't too frustrated that there is no physical walk this year for it, and they're willing to at least join these online discussions and see that, hey, we're still out there, we're just not in person.
Well, Mo, I really appreciate you being so candid, with us about your own mental health journey and your advice for others, whether they're on one or want to help someone who is. I appreciate you chatting with me today.
Thank you for having me. I hope that with this discussion, maybe at least one or two individuals hear this and be like, okay, it's all right. I'm not in the best of spirits. I'm not in the best of headspace, but tomorrow's a new day. Maybe tomorrow's going to be a little bit better than it was today. And if we could help inspire even one individual to wake up or get out of bed a little bit sooner tomorrow, all worth it.
And it's okay to not be okay. Just get out of bed. Exactly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for having me, and thank you for letting me open up about this.
Absolutely, Mo. Thank you. And this has been Let's Talk About It. We'll talk to you next time.